with gesso, acrylic gesso, and putting acrylic gesso on a painting to actually prime it or to have it so that you can actually paint on it. I like to paint oils because oil is more luminous. I can get a nice, I can layer it, and I can do glazes, get a very luminous quality much more easily than you can say with acrylic. Acrylic is nice because if you're shipping something cheap and you want to roll it up, it's flexible. The paint stays flexible, and the paint kind of lasts over time pretty good. I mean, most of the time, I think acrylic started getting popular in the 1960s, and for the most part, acrylic is holding out since then. You know, so you're talking about something like, 70 years maybe, something like that. So, or maybe 60 years, you know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, because everybody a lot of artists know how to prime their canvases with acrylic. I'm going to show you how to prime your canvas in oil. Now, Williamsburg makes an oil, like a lead base and a titanium based oil that's really nice. It's a professional artist oil-based primer. However, it's $80-some per 32 ounces or something like this. But Gamblin makes also a very good oil prime. It's an alkyd kind of oil base. It dries faster because the Williamsburg oil prime takes about 3 to 6 months, not weeks, but months to dry. This takes only 1 week to dry. And basically, what Gamblin suggests, Gamblin is the paints that I use. If you look over there and see my paints, you'll see I work with Gamblin. So I'm going to use Gamblin oil prime because it takes only 1 week to dry. 1 week, not 3 months or 6 months. 1 week. So that's nice. That's after you apply 2 coats. And basically, what you're going to do is apply the first coat of Gamblin oil ground, which is not, it's not gesso. The actual proper word is ground. And then, of course, what I used was Gamblin PVA size to size the painting. The size of the painting is just simply to protect the actual fabric here from the oil, because oil actually eats into the canvas, and it will basically eat away the canvas over time, and the painting will just crumble to pieces. So you have to protect your fabrics, either linen or cotton canvas, by sizing it first. So I put 3 coats of Gamblin PVA size on this particular canvas already, and now what I'm going to do is apply at least 2 coats of this ground, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So, because there's not a lot of videos online on how to use Gamblin specifically to oil prime canvases for oil painting. So that's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open the can. I'm just going to take a little screwdriver. Also, before I just get into all that, I want to explain the various tools that you may need to do this. You can use a roller, and basically you will take the oil primer and you'll put it on the canvas and you just roll it out. You know, you put it in a little puddle in the middle, or you can use a brush, and of course you just push it into the fabric, into the mesh of the fabric. You can use a nice trowel, you know, or palette, and scrape it. This is a stiff one. This one is slightly more narrow, but stiff. And this one right here is more flexible. What I usually do when I put a ground down on any canvas, I always do the back first. So I have this canvas turned over with the back exposed. Now I put 3 coats of the PVA size from Gamblin. This is the remainder of what's left. So this is a 24 by 36. And this is 33.8 ounces of PVC size. And 3 coats took this much for people who want to know how much it is taking. You know, because sometimes artists are on a budget and you really want to know. You know, I like to switch over from just acrylic gesso and use some more high quality materials for building my canvases so I can guarantee that they'll last longer. But what is the cost differential? This is about $32. It's 33.8 fluid ounces or 1 liter. And I use about 3/4 of it to put 3 coats. Now I put 3 heavy coats. So this 3 heavy coats I put on is probably 4 coats. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I have a piece of glass that I have taped down to my tabletop here. So I'm going to use a smaller palette knife to kind of scoop some out. And what I'm noticing right away, and this is the first time I've used this particular product, and the paint is relatively thick. I mean, it's thicker than your average gesso. It's kind of like, it's not even like plaster of Paris. It's more of a jelly kind of feel to it. Okay, so I'm gonna just get a couple of these out, and I can almost I should have got a spoon or a bigger palette. And they say add about 5% of Gamsol. And the Gamsol I have, where's my Gamsol? Okay, let me just pull that out. So you can see the labels on everything, so you know everything is. Gamsol, and this is a replacement for turpentine. It's odorless. It's like water. It doesn't have any smell to it at all. It's not harmful. And it's a great alternative to turpentine and other odorless mineral spirits that you use in your paint. So I'm just going to take a cap full of this. It's basically just about 1 tablespoon. And I'm going to mix this in with my palette knife with the oil paint because I want to thin it down because it's really, really, coming out the can, this is really, really thick. And of course, I don't want too thick of a layer. This is going to be basically a portrait. I'm going to put like a, Garden of Eden background in the background. And this young lady, she wants like maybe I might put a snake that she's talking to the serpent, you know, and being tempted with the apple, you know, some stuff like that. This is a commission piece, and I would like to please my customers, so that's what this is going to be about. And of course, it's interesting. So as an artist, I'm loving it because anything that is going to shake things up, you know, is going to be a good. Let me just take this out my ear so I don't get oil on it because I'm not really using it. I don't want to mess it up. Okay, so I'm going to mix that Gamsol in here really nice. Now this is really thick, so this is going to go on nice and thick. So I'm just going to mix it up. Okay, that's nice. I'm going to use this pretty stiff 3-inch, 2.5-inch bristle brush, and I'm just going to go sideways with it since it's so wide. And I want to just use one brush because I don't want to clean two. So I use really the widest brush for the other side. This right here is what I want to do first. And I do have these little push pins that I showed you when I actually did the PVC size. And that's how I keep it off of the table. And I'm just going around, and what I'm trying to do is just cover the staples with this. Just get a nice even coat. This is going right over top the sides, and I'm hoping this is enough. 3 coats of size is enough. Maybe I could have not been cheap and gone for 4. And I'm not going to be cheap. It's much more expensive than going to get the gesso route. And I think some people said on the Gamblin site, or some other people that have used this, go with 2 coats. So me going with 3 heavy coats should be enough. But this stuff is very thin. The PVC size, which is this, is the consistency of skim milk. So it's very thin, and it's designed to soak into your fabric. And then in soaking into your fabric, what it's going to do is it becomes united with your canvas. And so unlike when you do normal priming, that basically sort of sits on top, a little bit of it soaks in, but primarily most of the gesso kind of sits on the top. The PVC size sinks about 3/4 of the way through the mesh. And if you put it on really, really heavy like public, it might even soak all the way through to the other side. So that's how thin it goes in. That's how much it permeates the mesh of the canvas. So this whole canvas is basically polyvinyl acetate at this point, mixed with cotton. And basically I'm putting this oil base. Now, why do people like to have oil primed canvases? Why do artists like to have oil primed canvases over canvases that are acrylic primed? Because if you're an oil painter, what happens is when you're painting, the acrylic is kind of like a sponge. Acrylic prime is kind of like sponge. And oil prime is kind of like wood. Both of them are absorbent. Stuff will stick to both. But the sponge is going to suck in a lot more liquid than the oil. And what happens is, say for example, you know, most of your colors are made out of earth tones. You know, and say for example, red might be somewhat you know, it holds the oil really nice. But then you might put on blue, and what blue does is the blue might allow the oil to sink through. And when the oil sinks through, it sinks into that acrylic gesso that's like a sponge, and then you'll have one color beside another that's kind of matte and flat looking with no oil in it and lacks luster. But then you might have another color, say for example red, that might be very, very luminous and very, very shiny and got a satiny kind of silky, glossy finish. And it's uneven. The painting is uneven. You want everything to be consistent. You don't want one piece of your painting to be, you know, glossy or satiny, and the other one to be matte and very flat. You want it to be even. So that's what happened when you have acrylic, because what happened is some paints will hold the oil up into the paint layer, and then other paints would allow the oil to sink through and go into the acrylic layer. And since acrylic is so absorbent, that color might look flat. And then what happens is when you put it up and you light hit on a certain angle, one part of your painting might look a little too shiny, and it just doesn't look good all the time. I mean, the painting looks good dead on if the lighting is perfect. But if this is going in someone's home, who knows how the lighting is going to be? So what I like to do is use oil in those cases, because what the oil does is that it's going to stop that oil from sinking through. It's going to stop the oil from sinking through. And then when the oil doesn't sink through, and see what I'm doing is I'm painting the sides too. I always paint the sides. But okay, so now that I have the sides and the back, I put these little push pins on every corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this around. So I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to remove these little 2x4s that I have here. And I think I'm going to put this underneath. And then what I'm going to do is sit these on these little cleats that I made with the push pin. So I'm going to take this off, because everybody knows this Gamsol. I have it in a smaller container here so that I can pour it easy. And I'm going to put my canvas on my little demo table here. Now I would say hi, but I start to get paint on my fingers. I'm not one of those painters that can stay paint free, you know. I'm one of those painters, I get into my stuff, you know. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use this bigger trowel here, or this bigger plastic palette knife. See if I can get the paint out, because this is a much bigger surface. So I'm going to need much more of this oil paint. So I'm going to get quite a bit of it out, because I don't want to be stingy with it. I don't put a lot on, but I really don't know how much to put out, so maybe I should just be a little bit cool. So I think I'm going to just chill right there and close this up. Okay, so now that I have these little push pins, and this is sitting on top of the push pin, so it's like a little table. It's not quite sitting there. So the bottom layer that I just covered is not necessarily contacting my table, except for where the push pins are. So the canvas, the business part of it, that's going to receive paint. So what I'm going to do is put a little, you know, just like you do with your oatmeal, you put a little divot in it, put your butter, you put your sugar and cream in there. I'm going to do this with the Gamsol. I'm going to try to measure it, be a little bit more scientific about this. A cap full is about a teaspoon for me. I'm going to put some of this back, because I don't want to thin it too much. And now I'm going to try to spread this Gamsol in with the plastic trowel now, and not the smaller one, not the smaller palette knife. And this is very thick stuff. And I don't know how long this sat on the shelf at Jury Art before I purchased it, but it might not be a top product, because a lot of times people want that one coat. I mean, that's the beauty of Gesso. You put one coat on, you wait a couple hours, and then you put another coat on, and then you might let that wait till the next day, and then you can paint. Or you might let it wait till the end of the day, and then you start painting. It's really a good idea to let even acrylic paint wait for about 24 hours before you go putting it on. For example, between these coats here, it's going to be at least 24 hours for when this thing starts getting set up. And now I'm going to start putting it on, and it's very thick. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use the trowel, and this is going to also help to force it into the mesh. And I do this sometimes. If you guys look at go to my YouTube and see me doing this with acrylic, I'm doing it now with oil. You see that I actually will use a trowel, and also I will use a roller as well to roll it out. In this case, it's not a panel, and when you do it with this PVC size, the canvas is very tight like a drum, but it's not quite as tight. So the roller is probably not going to be my tool of choice here for spreading this across the canvas. And this is very nice because this is not going to penetrate into the mesh at this point because the PVC size is there. But what this is going to do is going to get into the grid pattern because the PVC size, when it dries, the canvas is still the same color. It dries clear just like Elmer's glue. You know, Elmer's glue kind of comes out white, but by the time it sets up, it's clear. So this comes out like skim milk white, skim milk consistency white, and by the time it dries, it's clear. And I allow my coats, almost everything that I do, I always allow all of the moisture to come out. Especially in Virginia, especially here lately, we've been having a lot of rain, and so there's a lot of humidity in the air. I don't like to apply blow dryers because sometimes the stuff will dry uneven. I like it a gentle dry. I don't necessarily want it to be uneven. Okay, now that I got enough on here, I think it has coverage. And I kind of spread this all the way out. I'm going to go up to the corner a little bit with this. Go over here kind of to the corner. And I can see this going to be really, I can already tell that just even after thinning this out some, this is going to be equal to like 2 coats of even very thick acrylic. Say for example, if you're using, I'm going to use a hypothetical, the Liquitex Professional. This would be equal to about 2 coats of Liquitex Professional, diluted by 5%. You know, it'd be about the same. And I always kind of dilute them a little bit, even the acrylics. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just use my stiff 2.5-inch bristle brush to kind of make sure I get every inch of this covered with the oil ground. And the whole idea here is now just it's kind of like frosting a cake. The stuff is so thick. It's not even like painting. It's closer to frosting a cake. However, I do like it. I like the way it feels, and I think once I get it smoothed out, I think it's going to make a really nice surface. Even the first coat, 1 coat is going to be a very nice surface because already, just spreading this out with the brush, I basically got everything covered. So what I'm going to start doing is going up and down in one direction to kind of get the little lumps and bumps from the oil ground out of the, kind of smooth down, just knock down nice and even. Then what I'm going to do is come back again and go in the opposite direction. And that's going to just, even every time I do this and switch directions, even though this is really thick and like frosting, really thick gesso, this is going to knock it down lower and lower with less and less raises in the actual surface. And this top facet, this is the business surface. This is the main surface. I do paint my sides to get the gallery wrap look, because that gives the end person an opportunity to say, okay, I want to get this frame, or I can just leave it unframed because I like the way the artist painted the sides of the painting. So I tend to paint the sides of my paintings as well as paint, the front. But of course, most of the attention, and what I paint first, and most of the attention is to the front, because that's where the image is. That's where that's where I'm doing my composition. That's where my design is going to go. So now what I'm going to do is switch this up again. And I'm going to try to get some of this, because I think I'm a little heavy over this side. And this is really, it might be 3 coats for 1, acrylic gesso. So 2 coats here, I'm going to say it'd be equal to 4 to 6 coats of Liquitex or Golden, because Golden is very close in consistency to the Liquitex Professional. So the golden top grade, not the basic grades, but the top grade, professional grades. And this is professional ground here. Gamblin only makes, really, they do make a type of paint that is, they make a paint that is the student grade. They only have 2 grades of paint, student grade and professional. They don't really have, but they're professional, still called artists. Most people who make paints, they have 3 grades. They have a student grade, they have an artist grade, and then they have a professional grade. And it's kind of deceptive, and it's really done for commercial purposes. Because, for example, if you're a person who paints in layers like me, you don't really need the professional grade, because what it is that, for example, the student grade would be 25% pigment and maybe 75% fillers and oils. So you're only getting 25% pigment in a tube. Now the artist grade is like 50% pigment, so you're getting a lot more pigment, and 50% oils and binders and things like that. So, but if you're painting, and the professional grade is 75%, so you're getting a whole lot more pigment. But you know what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to add oil to it anyway. Now what you can do between layers is you can take some fine sandpaper, like this, and you just go in a circular motion, and you sand down any irregularities that you don't want. So what I'm going to do is go back again, back this direction, one more time. This is going to smooth it out more. Now every time I stroke this brush, it adds a little bit of oxygen, or it's mixing on a microscopic level, more oxygenization, because oil doesn't really dry through evaporation, it dries through oxidization. So the more oxygen you mix in, the more oxygen is going to be released over time, and heat does affect the dry rate when something oxidizes. Well, when something evaporates, heat affects that as well. But it's a very measured, because see, evaporation can be how much humidity, but with oil it could be, and I don't want to get any strands of the fibers from the brush in the paint. Now, one thing that I might do, and that's why I have these tools out, I might just take this roller, and then I'll just gently go over that, and that is going to add, you can see it's putting a type of texture in there. So this is a nice little technique for all those who want to see how you can manipulate your painting surfaces in different ways. You can have this kind of texture in it too. And this is really, even though I put about 5% Gamsol, maybe a little bit more in there, this is really good stuff. So there we are. So you can use your roller, and of course you get different mesh rollers. It's not like a normal roller you paint with a house. A very fine mesh roller. Or you can just use your scowl here and go across, and then go over top that little pattern that you have. So you can have all kinds of abilities to do, scrape up, put down, do different things to your surface. Now, one thing I can say, I might have wanted to, I know that Gamblin says add 5%. I don't know if it just messes with the integrity of it or not. But this stuff is heavy duty, and maybe I put too much on. Maybe I should just brush it and kind of spread it out. Now, I don't know if I want to, you can do a circular texture, you don't have to do this. If you want more like a texture, you can do something like this. Get yourself something like that, you go over the whole thing. But in this case, I'm going to sand it, so I don't really need that circular texture. But I'm just kind of giving you some ideas of things that can be done. And since I went that way with the little scowl, I'm just going to kind of knock some of this out. Maybe I'll knock it out more unevenly by doing some of this circular texture in here. Of course, this works it into that pattern. And this is really covering over my patterns. And this is really good for portrait. So a lot of portrait artists don't want to see a lot of mesh of the canvas. They really don't want to see that. I don't want to get any sweat in my oil. Let me don't know if there's enough water, too much water in there. That might not be the best answer for me. Okay, so there we are. Okay, and I don't like to finish my paintings up and down. I like to just gently, at this level, I'm just going to do a gentle stroke with the brush. Gentle, horizontal, because this painting is going to be, I believe it's going to be a horizontal. I need to talk to the young lady again some more about it. Okay, so that's really nice. It's a really nice first coat. And I'm just going to just do some gentle brush strokes, some little touches on this in terms of getting it, the little pieces even. Okay, and there it is. It looks great. So what I'm going to do is, once I think it's nice, let me just a couple more strokes. What I do then is I put this in my dry area. I have a room that's just for curing my paintings. I have a little dimple there, but I'm going to sand that off. Just going to gently hit that again. I have a little room, and what it is, I keep that dust-free, bug-free, and people-free, or anything-free, so that my canvases have a chance to set up. So I go from the back of the canvas, I pick it up, and I take it into my dry room. And once it's in the dry room, it's going to sit there for at least 24 hours. And then if it's dry to the touch tomorrow, I'm going to apply one more coat. Then after that, I'm going to give it 7 days, and then I'm going to lay that out and paint that. And I'm going to paint that right here. So everybody come to my Second Raw channel or my Steve Foreman channel, and be sure to see the beautiful design that I'm doing on commission for a young lady. Yes, her portrait is going to be in the painting, her face, and so it's going to be kind of like a fantasy scene like you see me do. But I appreciate you guys coming by, and that is my tutorial on how to oil prime a canvas, you know. And just as a little recap, you want about 5% Gamsol. You're going to first prime it and size the canvas, the PVA size, Gamblin PVA size. You're going to scour some of this out, and I have a piece of glass here, and add your Gamsol to your mixture. Then you're going to mix your mixture on your glass and get it all mixed in nice and get it to the consistency you want to paint with and what you want to ground with. And then you can use either a plastic scowl, whichever thickness you want. If you want to get more of a, like I was pushing it in, I'm getting ridges. This will get less ridges, or you can use the roller. And what I used was a nice stiff 2.5-inch bristle brush. Okay, and I'm sure you can use like rags and towels as well. So anything to get any kind of texture you want. If you want to preserve some more of the mesh of the canvas, what I suggest is to actually just put less on and just dry brush it more or less into the canvas, because it's just going to be thick irregardless. So I would say just, you saw how much I put in, so if you want more mesh, I didn't want more mesh. What I want to do is I want to have a nice, heavy, professional portrait type ground. And so I'm still going to get some mesh out of it. I just not going to get as much. And that's fine, because I don't want too much. Because I'm going to layer this up anyway. And really, a lot of my paintings, you don't see a lot of the canvas. Some people like that because it looks painterly. I don't like that, because the original masters, they painted on wood, and they had the thing so smooth that they didn't want to have the texture. That's just a byproduct of them trying to get something lighter weight so they can move it around much easier. And it just so happened sometimes paint was so thin, you can still see the weave of the canvas. So that's it.